I'm the Executive Director for Planning and Scheduling with the American Red Cross. So really, what does that mean? My responsibilities include all of the production planning, all of the inventory, the finished goods inventory management, all of the order fulfillment or customer service that we have in place, and then also I look at supply chain management for the entire biomedical system in the Red Cross. Okay, I have a great staff that work for me. I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything about them because they're the ones that do the heavy lifting on a day-to-day basis, not me. I just get to stand in front of people like this, in front of you great people, and make these presentations. Normally, I will say that I'm usually in a room with a lot of doctors for one reason or another that we screwed something up. So it's actually kind of a blessing to talk to you guys. Some of the comments this morning I heard around, well, sales is out selling this, and we can't, operationally, we can't do that. I fight that battle every day. Our sales force will go out and tell a hospital, hey, we can turn around a stat unit in 30 minutes. Anybody here from Southern California? Anybody ever tried to make a stat run in Southern California in the middle of the day? It just does not happen. It doesn't matter where you're going. You're going to be on the interstate out there for quite some time. I'm going to give you a perspective of what the blood industry is, okay? And it's a perspective from the Red Cross, okay? We're not the only game in town, however, we are the largest, okay? Some of what I have will relate directly to other blood centers in particular markets. It may not, okay? So I'm going to give you what our information looks like. I'm not a doctor. I have some medical knowledge just based on what I've picked up. Over 15 years of working, but medical use for the products and stuff, it's not my forte. I'm more of a supply chain specialist within the Red Cross. Before I begin, I have a little audience participation for you guys. Anybody in here a blood donor? Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hopefully what I'll be able to do is show you what happens to your unit once it's collected. Anyone here right now currently working with the Red Cross? Just to give me a perspective, okay, a couple of you. Great. The last thing is, anybody in here ever received a transfusion or know somebody that did receive a transfusion? Great, look at the room. What I want to be able to show you by the end of this presentation is how that came about. How did we make that happen? How did that just, the blood just doesn't appear at bedside and to be transfused. I want to show you how we get it there. Okay, I am very passionate. I love this job. Like I said, I've been doing it for the same job for 15 years, and I love it. So if I start talking fast, or if I cover something or use an acronym, please stop me right there and let me know that you don't understand something. But along with myself, the employees of the Red Cross, they're very passionate in what they do as we go forward. All right, let me make sure I got the right button here. There we go. Okay, my mission in life on an everyday, day-to-day basis is getting the right unit in the right place at the right time every time. Okay, that's the motto we live. And the reason for that, not to be too overly dramatic, but the end result of somebody's life could be on the line here. Okay, when we go to serve patients, hospitals, we're serving patients. And every minute counts. So if we fail, someone could lose their life. So that's the motto that we live under and live with day to day. Now, if you look at serving a hospital blood bank, okay, if you talk about serving that, then that's basically delivering units to the blood center, or from the blood center to the hospital. All right, actually trying to serve a hospital blood bank is the orchestration of an entire supply chain. Okay, and in that supply chain we have 4 primary transportation legs. First, we have to get the collected unit from the collection site to the manufacturing site. We also have to get the test tube for those units collected to our testing sites. So there's 2 of the transportation legs. The third one is once the unit is manufactured and tested and released, then we have to transport the unit from our manufacturing site to one of our distribution sites. And then the last one, which is the final leg of our supply chain, is actually taking it from our distribution site to the customer. Okay. Okay, if we want to look at our supply chain and just look at the entire supply chain, I don't know how many of you know about the blood industry. When I joined the Red Cross, I was a little naive. I thought you collected a unit and that unit went to the hospital. All right, there's an actual huge supply chain that goes behind it. First, it starts with the recruitment of the donor. All right, there's a whole science and art around how we recruit our donors. I'm not on that side of the house as far as what we do there, so I can't really speak to it, but it all starts with that. From there, we collect the unit from the donor. After we collect the unit, all right, and in collections, okay, just to give you a perspective, we run 1,500 collection operations daily on average. So we're doing this across 1,500 different collection operations. Once we get those collected units, we transport those to the manufacturing site, and then we also transport the test tubes to the testing sites. And then we manufacture and we test the unit. Once the manufactured unit once the unit is manufactured and the testing is complete, electronically they come back together so that we can release the unit. Okay, we do an in-label release, make sure it meets all the FDA requirements for a blood component. Yes, sir.
Is the testing unit and the manufacturing unit co-located, or are they
No.
separate?
They're separate entities. In some cases, we do have where they're roughly either in the same city or in the same building, but they're separate entities. Okay. Once we release the unit, now we have to transport the unit from our manufacturing site to one of our distribution sites. There is some element of storage for these units. Okay, so we do have to store them for a period of time. And then finally, we deliver it to our customer. One thing I do have to mention here is that a normal supply chain, and this looks similar to most supply chains, not in just about most other industries. The one thing that's different with our supply chain from others is that we can't go out and purchase our raw material. Okay, we don't. We rely on the goodness of the American population to provide us with what we call our precious raw material. But that causes problems within our supply chain. Okay, I can't plan how many O-neg red cells I need a day. Or I can plan how many I need, can't tell you how many I'm going to get. So we're constantly doing a balancing act. Okay, we put a plan in place, and then every day we balance what the demand and what our draw is on our inventory, what our actual inventory levels are, and then where we get to what we're actually having, what's coming in the door from a collections perspective. But it's a constant balancing act. Okay, so when you look at our supply chain, the one major difference there is the incoming raw material is not really set. Okay, it's based on the generosity of the American people. I wish we could go out and buy it, but we can't. To give you some perspective on how large and what we do on a day-by-day basis, you can see the volumes there, but we represent and supply about 40% of the blood in the United States. Okay, 5 million red cells, about 900,000 platelets, and 2 million plasma units. Now, for purposes of this presentation, I've rolled it into 3 major product families that we use. However, please realize that we normally plan on about, I think, 10 major products. So red cells will stand on its own. It's by itself. It's the largest. Platelets I could refer to, included in platelets are what we call single donor platelets, and those are from automated collections, and I'll explain automated collections in a little bit. And also random donor platelets from whole blood. When you look at plasma, I could be referring to frozen plasma, fresh frozen plasma. We have a cryoprecipitate reduced plasma, and then we also have the cryoprecipitate product. So in addition to that, now you have all the other blood types. Okay, so with each one of these comes a blood type. So with a red cell, you have 8 different blood types that we manage. Okay, O-neg, A-neg, O-pos, A-pos. There's 8 of them. With platelets, same thing. You have 8 blood types. With plasma, you have 4. All right, there's no positive or negative. It's just OA or B, or AB. In addition to that, you have what we call product modifiers that we place on the unit. Now, a modifier can be anything from, do we need to irradiate the unit or not? Do we need to, is it CMV negative? Is it, does it have antigen screening that's been done on it when they have actual antigens on the blood? And the reason I tell you this is the variation that we see and what we have to supply. I can tell you right now, we've looked at, recently, we looked at our pediatric red cell line. And in that red cell line, we have 14,000 different variations of the product that our customers ask for. Okay? Now, we don't routinely do that. There's a higher volume in some or others, but when you start taking a look at the satellite bags that have to be attached, the dating of the unit that has to go out to the hospital, it ends up being about 14,000 different variations just for the one product line. Okay? So that's the variation, and that's the reason I mentioned that is the variation that we deal with. The other aspect that's a little different from us, anybody ever work in pharmaceuticals? In pharmaceuticals, when I was back with Merck, I dealt with months of inventory. Okay, in the blood industry, there's no such thing as a month's worth of inventory. Our target right now for red cells is 5 days. We maintain 5 days across the system of the red cell inventory. Platelets is 2 days. And I'll explain why we do 2 days in a little bit. Plasma, that's the one we can afford to store a little bit more of, and it's 14 days. So we try and maintain 14 days worth of blood. So trying to match, the blood types for what our customers need versus what we're collecting and then what we store in inventory, you can see the constant balancing act that always has to go on day by day. Okay, why do we store and why do we maintain or target so low in inventory? Okay, the first thing and the primary reason for that is the top line, the product shelf life. Okay, red cells, once we collect them, 42 days. And then platelets, you have 5 days. Plasma is a year. So plasma, we increase it to 14 days and maintain that on our shelves. The one I want to draw attention to is the platelet one for 5 days. Okay, that's 5 days from the time we put the needle in the arm until it actually expires on our customer shelf. So our inventory is constantly turning on pheresis. Right, we have, it's amazing how that works. We know down to the number of units that we need, and if we know, if we see what the inventory supply is in the morning, we know we're going to have trouble. That's how tight we maintain pheresis. Other requirements that we have on our supply chain that drive some of our decision making, it really gets around manufacturing requirements. So these start impacting some of our transportation legs. When you look at red cells, they have to be manufactured in 72 hours from collections. Okay, so if you remember the 4 transportation legs, that first one from the collection site to the manufacturing site, there's our time requirement. For platelets, it's even less. Okay, it's 24 hours. Now, plasma, when you get into the plasmas, you start looking at 8-hour turnaround times from the time it's collected to the time it has to be manufactured. It's got a longer shelf life, but it impacts the first leg of our transportation network in that we have to get it back quickly. The last thing we have is our shipping container and the restrictions that are placed on it. Like ARUP, we've done some extensive studies and validation on our shipping container. When you look at red cells have to be shipped refrigerated, and we use wet ice to maintain that temperature. But we've only have a validated shipping container for 48 hours. So wherever we transport it, we've got to have it there and back on in the refrigerator in 48 hours. Platelets are usually shipped at about room temperature, but the thing with platelets is they're a blood clotting agent. So if you let them sit still, they'll combine themselves in the bag and clump. So we have to keep them on constant agitation. So we've done studies, we can maintain them, or we can ship them within 24 hours. Normally when you're shipping them, it's getting they shake around a little bit, so it keeps them in agitation. But over 24 hours, if we miss that window, they get thrown away. Okay, I don't have any choice. That's the FDA. FDA regulates that for us. And again, that's basically based on our validation of our shipping container. Other blood centers, they may be longer, but for us in our container, it's 24 hours. Plasma is 48 hours. The one thing about plasma that's probably to mention is we ship it on dry ice. Okay, now we do a lot of shipment, you'll see later in the presentation, we use commercial airlines. Okay, commercial airlines won't take dry ice. So we have a shipping restriction there of what method we can use and how we do that. Okay, now that you've seen the supply chain and some of our restrictions on what we have to manage, what I want to do now is turn to geography, because that creates a whole new set of restrictions for us. And the Red Cross operates across the United States. Okay, what you see on the map here is what we commonly refer to as the red area. This is the map is broken down, if you get up close enough, it's broken down by zip code. Those are all the zip codes that we collect in throughout the year. Okay, it's about 65% of them. It's over 21,000 zip codes that we actually go out and have collection operations in. Okay, you'll notice some areas on the map, especially where we are right now, that are white. Doesn't mean that blood collections aren't going on there. It's just, you know, again, we're not the only game in town as far as blood collection goes, so there are other blood centers that cover those areas. The one thing I want to mention while I do have this slide up is if you look at the map, another balancing act that has to go on is what we call the collection variance or the collection balance. In the middle part of the United States, the central part of the United States, they collect on routine more than they need. Okay, so the demand in that particular area of the country is less than what we actually collect from the population. It's exact opposite out on both coasts. Okay, we have a negative collection balance on the east and west coast. So that creates a natural product movement flow that has to occur from the central part of the United States to both coasts. Okay, it's a phenomenon, I can't explain it. We have, you know, the large urban areas do not donate as much as the rural Midwest does. It's just a fact of what we've seen. But it creates a balancing act that has to occur with us, and it drives some of our transportation requirements through that process, just from the fact of where the product is collected versus where it's needed. Next map, and again, it's a rudimentary map. I tried to, I've done examples of this, trying to put the labels on specifically where we have our manufacturing sites. It gets too busy for a presentation like this, so I went, but I could talk about specifics if you like at the end, or tonight if we need to at the fireside chat. Now, some of you might be wondering why we need a manufacturing site, okay? Again, when I first joined the Red Cross, it was you collect a unit of blood, you ship that unit of blood to the customer or to the hospital. Okay, it gets transfused. Okay, there's actually a manufacturing process that goes on in the blood industry. Okay, when you look at a unit of blood, okay, normally what we get from a donor is a unit of whole blood. In that whole blood, there's three components. You have the red cell, you have the platelet, and you have the plasma unit. So that's what we describe as our collection process. And then what we do, and we actually have two different types of collection processes. The first is automated. Okay, automated collections involve a machine in the process that's actually bedside with the donor. So it will take out the whole blood unit, it will actually spin it bedside, separate out the components, and we'll keep the one that we want, and it puts back into the donor the parts that we don't need or that we don't want. Okay, and the reason for that is because we are mandated by the FDA on how much volume, fluid volume, we can pull out of a donor at any one time. If I'm targeting you as whole blood, then I have to count, and I need a red cell from that whole blood. Now I have to count in all the volume, the plasma and the platelet to go with it. If I do an automated collections and I just need platelets, then I can collect a larger volume of just platelets because I'm putting the red cell volume and the plasma volume back in. So that's the reason for the automation. Okay, normally with automation, where you'll see this is on platelets. Okay, we can collect a concentrated amount of platelets out of a particular donor, and it has another use of donor exposure. A dose for platelets is usually 5 whole blood platelets. So you have 5 donors to 1 patient. Whereas here, I can collect the same amount from one donor to one patient. So there are reasons for the automation on the one side. And it's usually on the apheresis platelets that we do. The other aspect, or the other collection operation, is what normally, if you would go to a blood center or a mobile drive, is a whole blood collection. Okay, so we're going to collect that whole blood. But now we have a manufacturing process. Okay, so we're going to take that, when we get it back to the manufacturing site, we're going to take that whole blood unit and we're going to spin it down into its components. And then we're going to separate those components. So we have the red cell, we'll have the plasma, and we'll have the platelet out of one donation. Okay, but they're separate and distinct products at that point in time. So that's the manufacturing process that goes on in the blood industry. Now, we collect in about, I don't know, a little over 21,000 zip codes. On the slide, you'll see where our manufacturing sites are. Okay, we have 25 manufacturing sites that do both whole blood manufacturing and apheresis manufacturing. We have 4 sites that just do apheresis manufacturing. Now, the apheresis manufacturing, when you look at it from an automated collections, okay, it's spun bedside, all we get is the platelet. The one thing that we are now required to do is bacterially test every platelet unit that we have. So we've got an extensive network that has to be throughout our system, that we actually take samples off of all the platelets, we inoculate it, we let it sit and bake in a chamber for a period of time to see if any bacteria grows. If it does, we toss the unit. It's, you know, a lot of times it's just from the skin, from the needle going into the skin. But that's the manufacturing process that has to occur with apheresis platelets. So know that we have, on a daily basis, we're taking 1,500 blood drives across the United States, and we're funneling all of those collected units into one of these 29 sites. Okay, the other thing I do want to mention here, while I do have the manufacturing sites up, is we have, I mentioned it earlier with plasma. Our shelf, the manufacturing requirement for some of the plasma units is 8 hours. So from the time we stick the donor to the time we have to manufacture the product, it's 8 hours. That's cryoprecipitate. It's fresh frozen plasma, which has to be manufactured and frozen within 8 hours. So we've got, of the 29 manufacturing, or actually I'm looking at the 25 right now, the subset, we have 8 sites, and random donor platelets as well is an 8-hour manufacturing process from whole blood. So we have 8 different manufacturing sites that make, that we funnel all of our random donor platelets into, that we need to have made. We have 11 sites that make all of our cryoprecipitate. So the extra added requirement there is I've got to get it within, you know, usually within 1 or 2 hours of collections, we start the transportation process to get it back to the manufacturing site. But it limits our scope of where we can take those donors from. Because I can't, if we're collecting somewhere that's not within a couple hours of one of our manufacturing sites, I can't make the product. While all this manufacturing is going on, we're actually testing the unit. Okay, each unit, as per the FDA, has to be tested for certain different infections, and that occurs at one of our 4 sites here that I've got listed. So we have a testing lab in Portland, we have one in St. Louis, we have one in Charlotte, and we have one in Philadelphia at this time. Now, the testing process itself is highly automated. Okay, it's very expensive capacity to have sit idle. So one of the struggles that we do on a day-to-day basis is how do I keep a continuous flow of test tubes going into the NTL in order to keep the machinery running. It has to run 100% of the time. If it stops, then what happens is the testing machine has to be primed again. Any reagents that we use in priming the machine is waste. So what we want to do is constantly keep that going. So not only do I balance what's going into the manufacturing sites from our collection sites, now I'm also balancing the continuous flow of the test tubes into one of these 4 testing sites. Okay, we also have prioritization of testing that has to occur as well. Apheresis platelets, because of its 5-day shelf life, I don't want those sitting around for 3 days waiting to get tested. I want those tested the minute they hit the door, so we prioritize those. Pediatric red cells, it's even tighter time requirement. Most hospitals will want those within 3 days of collections. Okay? And I can tell you, the one thing in our business that you don't want to miss is a pediatric order. All right, the world comes down when you're not taking care of the pediatrics. So, trying to get logistically the unit to the manufacturing site and the test tube to the right testing site in order to release the unit and have it at the hospital within 3 days of collections, it's a pretty stressful operation to get that done. But it's done every day across all of these sites. Next, we get to my distribution site. Again, I would put all the names, but it gets very crowded and you're not going to be able to read them anyway. But since we've got only 26 or 25 manufacturing sites due to capacity utilization, it takes us farther away from our customer. Okay, so throughout there, so what we've done is we've augmented our manufacturing sites with a series of distribution sites. And where these are placed is constantly being evaluated. We look at what the expectation of the customer is as far as the supply, what we can service and what we can't service. So we're constantly in motion looking at this. I mean, there's 72 that we have currently right now, and I can tell you I'm looking at 3 more right now as we're looking at it, just based on shifts in customers and the like. But with the distribution sites, each one of them will store platelets, red cells, and plasma. So they usually have a refrigerator, they usually have a platelet rotator, and they usually have a freezer, okay, to store all 3 of our products. Yes?
Have you ever considered using courier services who have warehousing as distribution sites?
We looked into it at one point in time after 9/11, but we decided not to go that route at this point. Because usually, if you have, each of our manufacturing sites becomes a distribution site just by nature. But we have these smaller sites, and they're very small. They can be a room. We've got standalone refrigerators, you've got standalone freezers, and you've got a tabletop agitator. So a lot of these are really small. We did look at it after 9/11 and all of that caused, but we didn't go down that path. All right, last map I have is where our customers are. Okay, so if you think about, we collect in about 21,000 zip codes. We funnel all of that into 25 manufacturing sites. We also funnel that down to 4 testing sites. Then we spread it back out to 72 distribution sites serving our 2,500 customers, okay, located throughout the United States. Again, you'll see white areas on here, referred to white and red. The white areas are served by the other blood centers. Doesn't mean that there's no hospitals in those locations, just we don't serve them. One thing to also mention, and I didn't put them on here because I'd have to put the world. The American Red Cross runs the rare donor inventory for the entire United States. Okay, this is housed out of our facility in Philadelphia, and they ship all over the world. All right, these are the rare units where we may have 1 or 2 donors that's identified across the world for a specific antigen. Okay, normally we freeze the red cells. They'll last for 10 years, so we freeze them. But we run that rare donor registry out of our Philadelphia office, and they ship all over the world. The other thing that we do is we do work with the military. On occasion, we're the backup for the military. They have their own collection, their own blood program, but we do back them up on occasions. As we've gone through Desert Storm and the like, we've shipped a lot of plasma to the military over the last couple of years. Not so much in the recent time. The other thing we do is we do work with the State Department. So I never realized how many people were overseas or U.S. citizens that are overseas working in embassies. But in a lot of cases, they become ill, need a transfusion. We ship the product. All right, we've shipped to Philippines. We've shipped all over the world with that. And one thing I do want to say, I heard some negative comments about couriers earlier this morning and all the horror stories. Okay, I'm going to share one horror story with you that I had recently. We actually had a courier dropping off blood at a hospital, and their driver was arrested in the parking lot of the hospital as they were getting out of their car for possession. So that's my horror story. But to go with that horror story, I've got about 10 stories for each horror story that we have that is really good. We partner with our couriers a lot and with our customers, but I don't want to be remiss in saying that, because I know the stress that everybody's under, and everybody's like, you're at the last end of the chain. You're the last link in that chain, and a lot of times it gets squeezed. But we do a lot of work with a lot of couriers, and I have nothing but good things to say about them at this point. So I did want to mention that to you as we go through here. So how do we manage all of this? Okay, we manage it just like any other business, because even though you look at the American Red Cross and it's a non-for-profit or not-for-profit organization, all right, the blood industry is a business. Whatever you take out of here, it is a business, and we have to manage it that way. Okay, there's money changing hands all over the place, and so we run it like a business. So the way we run our business is we do a monthly, we do an annual budget and an annual plan, and then every month we run the we have a sales and operations planning process that runs monthly. Okay, all we're doing is taking that annual plan and comparing it to our most recent forecasts. So we're just updating our annual plan with current forecast as we go through here. The object is we want to make sure that our supply chain is aligned, okay, to deliver what our customer needs. So whether it's an adjustment that has to be made in collections, whether it's an adjustment that has to be made in manufacturing or in distribution, we're going to catch it in this process. Because of the timing of some of our products, we also run master production scheduling. So I have a scheduler in my shop that schedules all of our manufacturing sites for what products they need to make every day. So we have that as well, because we have to know on a day-by-day basis what's coming in and what's going out. There's another group that actually does master production scheduling for our collection side. So we're in constant communication trying to manage that. But that's how we've managed it in the past. The real part, though, is we can put the best plans in place that we want. It's when execution occurs is when we go into action. Because I could put, like I always tell my boss, I can put the best plan I want out there, but if the field can't operate and execute against it, it doesn't do us any good. And that's where we really come into play as far as the execution. The one item I do want to mention on here and highlight a little bit more, because I think it will relate more to you, is our distribution resource planning. What we have to do every month is it starts with an annual plan. We use the annual plan to set our capacities, our shipping capacities for our sites. So we need to know how many are coming and going at each one of our manufacturing sites and each one of our distribution sites to set our staffing. But then we include it in our monthly S&OP process. So we're taking our most current forecast for both sales and for our collection side, and we're starting to adjust our distribution plan and what needs to be done. Just to give you kind of a for instance, every day we have roughly 3,000 units in motion going from one of our sites to another site constantly. And it has to be managed every day. So, and how we do that really is the culmination of this process. When you get down to the lowest level is the daily execution. I have a staff that gets on the phone twice a day, in the morning and the afternoon, to see who's having the runs on the products at certain distribution sites, do they have enough inventory, and managing and making sure that we have the inventory properly placed across all our distribution sites. Okay, that happens every day, 7 days a week. Okay. And it'll never fail. We try and be as 24/7 as we can. Yeah, and the like, and most of our operations were on call, but never fails. The time that you don't have somebody on call is when that urgent need is going to come in. It never fails, and I'm sure you guys can relate to some of that experience as well. Okay, next slide. So how do we accomplish moving all this stuff around? Okay, we have 5 basic transportation methods that we use. About 2 years ago, I can tell you the first one there, staff driver, my boss came to me and said, it doesn't look like we're in the blood industry anymore. It looks like we're in the transportation business. Okay, we manage a fleet of trucks and cars, rather large one across the U.S., and we have drivers on staff. Okay, so we use that. We use it in all 4 transportation legs. We also have generous volunteers. Okay, they'll come out and they'll say, "I'll give you 2 hours of my time every day or every week." We put them on routes. They drive for us from either the blood centers. Actually, we use them in most of our legs, transportation legs. What's that? No, we have a fleet that we maintain. They use ours. The next one is paid courier. Okay, in some markets we've decided to go away from our staff drivers and actually use ground couriers. Okay, we have several markets like that throughout the U.S. So we folks like a lot of the company, I know some of you have already come up to me and said, "Hey, we're looking at this." But we do, on occasion, we constantly analyze it to make sure that we've got the right cost, because we're under the same cost pressures that everybody is. So, is it more cost effective for us to maintain our fleet and our drivers, or is it more cost advantageous to us to have somebody else do it for us? Let the experts handle the transportation. It's my call. We also use a lot of courier service through the next flight out or for next day. Okay, and that's primarily the biggest use of that is when we're moving from our manufacturing site to our distribution site. FedEx, UPS, you name it. We have one courier company, a management company that actually does our next flight out for us, manages everything for us. We have a distribution site down in Puerto Rico. They manage all the invoicing for international shipments for us. It's great. Turn it over to them, let them do it. They're the experts in it. We also use, when I mentioned we do ship overseas, they do all the customs work for us. So it's great. We're not in the transportation business. We're in the business of saving lives. Let them be the experts. They do it. So we do. But we're constantly evaluating this. Okay. How do we improve? How do we go after and make our footprint smaller, but yet at the same time reduce cost and serve our patients better? And that's what it's all about. That's what everybody's always after. So we're constantly evaluating that to look at that. I can say that when you're looking at the local level, get down to the lowest level, so our distribution site and the customer network around it that it serves, we do routes, we do route optimization. Okay, the only thing I will say is that we have to maintain a reserve, so to speak, because we do have the unexpected that comes up. So we do reserve capacity on our transportation side to handle some of this. But that's how we do it. I mean, we've got an army of staff drivers, we've got an army of volunteers, and then we pay for the rest of it. I'm doing on time. Good. Okay, product movement. All right, now, we have, just like everybody else has, I mean, you guys experience a variation in your needs and services from your customers on a daily basis. We have the same thing. Okay, when I look at it across the system for every, roughly around each day, the demand for blood is pretty constant, but that's at the system level. So if I look across the United States for our needs, it's fairly constant. But when you get down to the local level, it's all over the board. Okay, one minute it'll be up, 1 minute it'll be down, one day it'll be high, next day it'll be low. So that's one variation that we deal with. We deal with the variation of the products, as I mentioned earlier, and then we also deal with the variation that I mentioned earlier of execution. Okay, I'm planning you to go out and collect 10 units at this blood drive, to come back and give me 5. Now what do I do? Okay, so that's a variation. But the way we manage our ordering process with our hospitals also creates variation in our process. And I'll give you, for instance, standing delivery. Okay, this is the greatest one for us because we know it's a set volume and it's a set delivery schedule. It's very predictable, very plannable. Every day it goes out, we're good. Okay, on the other end of the spectrum is the on-call. Okay, and I commonly refer to this in our world as the you call, we haul. Okay, that's what it is. Hospital calls us, says I need a red cell, and we haul it out there. Okay, I can't predict it. There's no set time, no set volume, It's completely unpredictable. And for that reason, we have to maintain some of our inventory reserve. The one I do want to mention and spend a little bit more time on is the stat ad hoc at the bottom. Okay, that's the killer. Okay, normally when that order comes in, there's a patient on the table, and they need a unit that they don't have in their inventory. So we have to figure out how to get it there. Well, number one, I got to figure out, do I have it? Number two, I got to figure out where it is, and I got to figure out how to get it there. Okay, so we have to maintain a reserve for that. But that's what makes or breaks the relationship between a blood center and the hospital. Okay, our ability to serve stats and get that product there when they need it to their expectation, that's what makes or breaks our relationship with most of our customers. The other thing that the stat order, and really what we call is the stat order turnaround time. Okay, from the time I get the order to the time they have the unit in their hands, how long is that period of time? Okay, and that time is different in different markets, and it sets a lot of our operational parameters. You know, when do I want to have my staff available? All right, am I running a 24/7 shop, or can I go on call? How far my staff live away from my distribution site? So it sets some operational limits there. It also tells me where I need to put my distribution locations. Because a lot of our hospitals, you know, they're not next, in some cases, they're right across the street or right next door. Other cases, they're 100 miles away. So how do we do that? So we're constantly evaluating that as far as our distribution, but that one factor right there is one of our primary drivers for how we define our service level to our customers. It's how we can do that. And I can tell you right now, if you look at our 2,500 customers and you look at our 72 distribution sites, I can cover and reach every one of our hospitals, our 88% of our hospitals, within 3 hours drive time. If you drop it down to 2 hours, it's about 50%. Okay, so that's one thing that dictates, you know, how we do and how we evaluate that. But that one right there, and some of you that have dealt with us before, that's crunch time. It's trying to get that unit out to the hospitals, and that's where we spend a lot of our time and effort on our transportation. Okay, so I've talked about all the normal stuff that happens. Okay, now let's get into the fun stuff and talk about all the abnormal stuff that happens. Okay, and they've occurred over the years. I've seen them all. 15 years, I don't think there's one I haven't seen. At least I haven't seen a new one in a couple years. But what we've done is we build contingency plans around these. All right, and we look at the external influences that might impact us and say, okay, how are we going to handle this? Okay, we've categorized them into two different types of events. One is the expected. The other one is the unexpected. With an expected event, I have time to plan for it. I can react prior to that event ever happening. So when you look at, and I've listed a few up here, you know, winter storms and hurricanes. Okay, not a lot of time to plan, but we have time to plan. Okay, the typical one is the nor'easter coming up in the middle of February up through the East Coast. Okay, shuts everything down on the East Coast probably from Atlanta all the way up through Maine. Okay, everything's gridlocked. What do? Okay, our response to a winter storm is we bolster the supply in that area before it gets hit. Okay, we stock the shelves before it hits. Okay, hurricane, we do the exact opposite. We do not put product into the impact area. We put it around it. Okay, for instance, Katrina. When Katrina hit, we had 5,000 units sitting in Birmingham. We had it sitting in Little Rock. We had it sitting in Tulsa and in Dallas. I put nothing in the impact area. Okay, we do that routinely on the East Coast when Wilmington or Savannah or Hilton Head are going to get hit with a hurricane. It goes all the way around it. We put it out around it because there's a potential we could lose all of that product. With Katrina, we have a distribution site right in Mobile. With Katrina, the entire thing was flooded. If we had inventory, we pulled all our inventory out of there before it hit. If we had had it there, we would have lost every unit we had because it would have been flooded. So we've been able to come up with it. The last one, the one up top that I did mention earlier, is national security events. Anybody ever been involved with one of those from a transportation perspective? Okay, national security events are deemed by the government as threat risks, all right, and they elevate the threat risk. Okay, things like the inauguration of the president, State of the Union address, believe it or not, World Series, Super Bowl, on and on and on. We have to build contingencies around those. We get very familiar because we service the D.C. area. So anything that goes on in Washington, D.C., the African Leaders Summit, I think, is there this week. We actually have, or next week, we actually have to build a contingency around that. So normally there's a process with the government. We identify who the critical care hospitals are. So in other words, who's the first responders from a hospital standpoint if something happens. We plus their inventory up to about 120%. And then we build what's called push packages back at the nearest distribution site. And it's primarily AB plasma and O-neg, the universal donors that we need. And we have those ready to go at a moment's notice. So we do this routinely everywhere. And it's not just us. There may be, like if something happened here in Denver, Bell Bonfils is the main blood supplier out here. They would take the point for the contingency plan for the national security event. So it just depends on who services that area and who's the primary. But we do plan for that and a contingency. Luckily, in my experience over 15 years, we have yet to have a time when we had to actually distribute product out of that and push the push package out. So luckily, no. Yes?
How did you handle Sandy?
I'm sorry?
Sandy, how did you handle post-Sandy? Did that rush you in the area?
Where we get hit mostly is in collections, okay? So the demand for the product, it will drop some in that particular area, but it's low. And then what will happen is we lose our collections in that area because obviously the people that were impacted by the storm are dealing with other problems, not just what we need. But that's one of the values of the Red Cross, okay? We are big, okay? At any one point in time, I can tell you right now, we carry anywhere from 100 to 150,000 red cells on a shelf across our distribution network. So if an area like Sandy gets hit, I can pull in inventory from another location immediately and put it there. Okay, so we've reacted to it and had those different. The winter storms probably are the best ones. Last year, I think Atlanta got hit with that ice storm. Oh, that was horrible. Okay, but we knew it was coming. We put the inventory in there, and then they're able to at least get locally out to where they need to be. Okay. If I go on to the unexpected, okay, these are the ones that we can't plan for, so we just have to react to, okay? And those could be anything from a tornado, a plant explosion, a school bus accident, a mall shooting. We get calls for everything. The hospitals immediately will pick up the phone. I need 10 O-negs in here right away, okay? We ship them, okay? And that's more reactionary between what the local hospitals have on their shelves, what we have, and how soon they need it. A lot of times what you'll see from us in this particular instance is we will not necessarily send it to the hospital, but we'll send shipments from one distribution site to the closest distribution site to bolster our inventory in that location. It just cuts down the time on when we can react. The last one, the terrorist attack. Okay, this is one that's prevalent now that we have to deal with. Probably the best one to talk about is 9/11. Okay, there were a lot of heroic efforts on 9/11. Okay, I'm not going to discount anything that anybody did, but I have to say that my staff went into motion for that day. I was working in Washington, D.C. at that time, and our building was actually right next to the Iwo Jima Memorial. It overlooked it. Okay, which if you know the geography in D.C., it actually looks right down at the Pentagon. Okay, so when the plane hit the Pentagon, the ceiling tiles in our building buckled. And then we saw what happened. Okay, but we went into motion at that point in time. All the airlines were down. Okay, no transportation via air. We had the unknown. Okay, 2 buildings were hit. We didn't know what the blood usage was going to be. Nobody knew. I could say that within 24 hours of the planes hitting the building, we had moved 10,000 units, 10,000 red cells into New York City without air, with major arteries clogged. I mean, anybody that was on the East Coast tried to go anywhere. I was in D.C. I just said, forget it, I'm not going anywhere. There's no way to get out. So we were able to ship and move 10,000 products in and around the New York City area at that point in time within 24 hours. So it was a really good feat for my guys, I thought, at that point in time. But there's others out there. We deal with them all the time. Any type there's an incident, wildfires out here in the West, we do react to those as well. That's more from a plasma need than a red cell need. Burn victims usually use more plasma than red cells, so that's usually where we get involved with that. Okay. All right, I'm squeezed between you and lunch, so I'm going to try and get you guys out of here on time for lunch. One thing I do want to say again, I do want to reiterate, we develop a huge partnership with our vendors, okay? And I heard some building again off of Christopher. It's lucky I get to go after you. Some of the comments, okay? Is it service? I mean, or is it cost? Okay, and cost is the bottom line. Everybody's trying to squeeze it out. I can tell you a story from my perspective that we tried to squeeze out cost in one location, and we ended up having to reverse that decision because of service. We use a national courier to look at all of our next flight out routes for us. We switched over to another company about 2 weeks in. The company realized they couldn't do it. So it took us 6 months to switch them back. It's not just about cost. They were the lowest cost provider on the RFP. We went with them. I sat across from the table before we awarded it. They said they could do it all. 2 weeks into it, they couldn't. I mean, I had a laundry list of concerns, complaints going back to them. They couldn't do it, so we switched it back. So it's not always about, from my perspective, it's not always about cost. It's about service. Okay, and from service, I mean its appearance. You don't want couriers rolling into the hospital, I don't, into the hospital lab, you know, with the muscle t-shirts on, with the wife beater t-shirts on. You don't want them rolling in there looking like that, but we do, we have them. But appearance is probably the easiest one. You know, we've even talked with some of our vendors about providing them Red Cross shirts to have them all look the same to our customers. So its appearance is one thing, service is another. The other one is timeliness. Those are the three things that I deal with and routinely hear complaints back from our customers on our service level. Is appearance for our couriers or even our drivers are sometimes are like that. Their service level, how courteous are they with what they're doing, and then and the timeliness. Okay, those are the three things that I'm going to open up to questions. I've got my contact information up here. Please feel free to contact me at any time that you have questions. But I'll open it up now for questions. And again, thank you so much. I appreciate the time. Yes, go ahead.
A question I have is, you talked about that you weren't, I mean, you're the largest, obviously, but do you ever interact with any of the other collection agencies that do this also?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a national database of if a hospital needs a specific blood, that they can check a database to know whether you've got it or this other agency's got it? Or they just call you and you know if this other one has it? And
yep.
Is it, okay.
There's a national, the American Association of Blood Banks runs a database like that, and we're a member of that, and we do. But normally what our customers will do is they'll call us, and we do the search if we can't supply it. In other coordination efforts, that,
You can't have, if you don't have it, you know somebody else can get it.
well, we'll put the request out through the network to see who has it, and they'll respond to us. The other way we do a lot of work with I don't want to say competitors, but with other blood centers, they are our competitors, is, you know, take a location like Denver, for instance, okay? We have a couple hospitals that we service here. We don't have a distribution site. Our nearest distribution site's in North Platte in Nebraska, quite a ways. We can't handle the stat orders. So we work with Bell Bond Fees where we supply portions of their product. They help with the stats. Okay, so we do coordinate that across many locations in that area. Texas is another market that we do that with quite a bit. Okay, yes.
Hi, Paul Gettings with NGL.
Hey, Paul.
Can you detail what's your annual spend on those services, paid courier, ground, paid air, paid NFO, for example?
I can tell you, for next flight out and next day service, it's about $5 million. When you start taking a look at all of our transportation budget, which is both courier and our paid staff, and this primarily deals with delivery of the test tubes and delivery to the customer from the distribution sites, it's around $35 million a year. It's a lot. You know, we have customers, believe it or not, we have customers we deliver to because of the way they've got their needs structured. I've seen it up to 8 times a day that we make stat order deliveries, okay? Just, you know, a lot of it depends on how active and forgive the colloquial term, but how active their knife and gun club is on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening. And we see a lot of that. I mean, that's what happens. You know, they'll order one, there'll be another shooting, there'll be another unit that gets ordered. So it's a stat, you know, so we do see, we do have those. Other places, we make one delivery a week to. Just depends.
I have a question. Can you touch on reimbursements? How is the Affordable Care Act or anything in the healthcare industry, how is it changing in your field?
In our field, the one thing that we're seeing right now is the biggest impact on us is the hospitals, and they're combining into their systems. Okay, and because I may handle one or two of these customers, but they get rolled into a new system. There's another blood center that supplies that system or gets awarded that contract. Now I lose those two customers. Okay. The other thing is, I mentioned earlier with the IDNs. Okay, the IDNs that are running these things, these guys, they're sharp. I've sat across the negotiation table for several of them, and they bring in, I mean, supply chain experts. They have consultants. They come in and say, "Here's what we want," and they don't budge. You know, you've got to come down on your price. The other thing that we're seeing right now in the environment that's going on right now is with the blood industry, our volumes are dropping. Okay, if you look at what we transfuse per 1,000 people versus the Europeans, we're high. And what we're starting to see is that right itself. We're coming down to the levels of the Canadians and of the Europeans. So we're starting to come down. But what that's doing overall is it's dropping our volume. Okay, so we're in the process right now of, you know, what our volume's going to be in 3 years versus what our infrastructure needs to be, and how do we afford that, because, you know, the customers are demanding prices that are less. We don't necessarily get involved with the reimbursement, but, you know, what we can charge the hospital and what gets reimbursed are closely aligned. Okay, so I don't know if did that fully answer your question?
Yes, okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
Everybody's ready to eat. Oh, one more.
One more question.
There's a strategic reason why you're not in certain markets. Florida kind of stands out.
There's probably a lot of history that I could go through as to why we're not in Florida. We used to be in Florida. We're not anymore. It just, from our perspective, wasn't economical for us. There's a very strong blood center down in Florida that controls most of Florida One Blood. They collect most of that product. So we just haven't challenged them. You know, it's the same thing. You know, you've got Blood Center Wisconsin up in Wisconsin that's very strong. You got a BSI, which is based out of Phoenix, which is very strong in the West. So just depends on, you know, whether we feel it's economical for us to go into a market or not.
Anyone else? No?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.